a video of me faffing around with a few things. So I render down fat to cook chips in. So this is beef dripping, which I have, well, it'll be suet from the beef that I've minced and then mixed in with hot water and then brought up to the boil and slowly simmered so the fat renders out of the suet. So we'll separate that and collect it, and then that's what I'll cook my chips in. We'll also be left with a jellified liquid underneath, which can be used as a bit of a substitute for a stock. So that's beef dripping. This is the same, but the fat and skin from some ham joints that we're cooking tonight. So I've minced that down and added a bit of water, and it's rendering the fat out of that. Same again, we'll take the fat off the top of that and we'll use it in pastry, and the underneath of it will be a ham stroke bacon flavoured stock that's really kind of quite jellified, that we can use in soups and stews and things like that, which is lovely if I'm honest. And then, so the problem with the beef dripping is I have to mince it, and it takes forever to kind of mince, to cut all the meat up and then to mince it, and I just kind of think it's putting a bit of strain on my mixer. Can we do it in a better way? So I have kept a lump of beef fat whole, and I'm just going to poach it in some water on the back of the stove and kind of see what happens when we do that. It might render some fat out, it might not, it might be a disaster, it might just cook the fat, but that's fine. It might then make it easier to mince that fat down and to then extract more fat out of it. I'm also going to slow roast this lump of beef fat to see what happens with that. See if it's better to roast it, slow roast it in the oven, or to poach it in some stock in the what we call it, in the on top of the stove. So this is the beef dripping when it's been collected and sieved and cooled and stored in a container. It's really kind of quite hard, is that. It's very good for making chips, but not really kind of quite good for anything else. And I think, so if you look around the outsides there, it's come away from the sides of the metal container. And I think to myself, that's probably why we don't confit things in beef dripping for long-term storage, because the fat wants to contract when it's cool, so it comes away from the sides of the container, and then bacteria can get down the sides between the side of the container and the fat and kind of turn things off. So that's probably why we use goose fat or duck fat or lard to confit things, to kind of stop that bacteria kind of getting in. That's just a thought. That's just a thought. Now, so this here is the fat from the pea skins I've been making. So it's, where is it? That's on my finger. I can't find my finger. Oh, there's my finger. Right. So the only problem is it's, oh yes, excuse dirty fingernails, because I've been making grape jelly at home, and the grape juice has stained all my fingers. So my fingers are a mess with stained with grape juice. It's not that I'm dirty and I don't wash myself. So the only problem with this fat is it's a little bit soft to be used in pastry. What would happen is it would be far too crumbly and almost disintegrate when we cooked the pastry. So it wouldn't protect the meat. It would just kind of disappear off to dissolve into nothingness. But there's loads of flavour in that, and it's really nice to make pastry. So what I do is I mix that fat, 2/3 of that fat, with beef dripping here. It doesn't have to be beef dripping, it can be the skimmings from the top of things like cottage pie, not shepherd's pie, cottage pie, which is beef. Or when I've been braising meat for pies, you get a layer of fat at the top of the pies, and I will collect that fat as well, and I will use that in the pastry to harden up that lard. We'll look at some lard from a packet in a second. Now this is the fat that I've made for pastry fat, so that is 2/3 lard to 1/3 beef fat, and we end up with a firmer fat that's still got all that lovely kind of flavour of the pork in it, but it's just a little bit firmer and a little bit easier to use. So I'll pause and we'll have a look at some lard. Right, so this is a packet of lard from the supermarket, and as you can see, it's a lot harder because it's just come out of the fridge. These all come out of the fridge as well. I can't push my finger into it like I can with that lard that I've made myself. So that's why we can make pastry straight out of this type of lard that we buy. It hasn't got the flavour in it. Well, it's got no flavour to it really. But it makes really crumbly pastry, and that's because it's a little bit harder than that. So that's what I'm kind of getting at. We can use pastry, we can use lard straight from the supermarket to make really good quality pastry. But if we're rendering down fat ourselves, we can't use that fat to make pastry out of. It needs to be hardened up with something like beef tallow, beef dripping, or skimmings from. Skimming sounds awful. The fat that you remove from beef cooking juices. So there we go. Yes, so we're back when we kind of see what happens with that bit of beef and the beef that I put in the oven. But it's a bit of a 2-for-1 type of video. Right, bit noisy, but that hasn't really worked. We've got some fat come out of it, but not a lot. That's crispy, and then this one hasn't worked either. So what I am going to do though is I'm going to let those go cold, and we'll cut into them and see if they're easy. But they will be easier to cut into. But I'm just kind of quite curious. But I'm at work and I'm a little bit busy, so that can wait for another time. But it will be part of this video. This fat's gone cold. Let's have a cut into it. I just don't think there's an easy way to do this. I don't think there's some kind of hack. I think it's just a simple case of having to cut the fat up and then mince it, which is just going to take time. I don't think there's any kind of easy way around it. So, but we've still got to cut it up and we've still got to mince it. We can't get the fat out of it in an easy way. You know, I mean, it's easier to cut and it will mince easier, but probably only when it's warm. So unfortunately I don't think there's an easy way around it. What's this one like? It's slowly roasted in the oven. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier to cut, but I've still got to cut it up, still got to put it through the mincer. So, not to worry. But if we don't try, we don't find out, do we? I might as well film this. This is I've been braising some beef for pies. This is the cooking liquor, and there's all that fat on top. That is what I'm going to use to make the pastry. Right, so that's beef, and then this is the lard that I made. So there is 500 grams worth of lard in there, and we're going to put in 250 grams worth of the beef fat in that kind of ratio, and then that will firm the lard up. We need to heat it. We can't just have them separate and rub it into the flour. They need to be combined together to actually form like what I call pastry fat. So we'll heat that up and we'll add 250 grams worth of that to that. If we haven't got 250 grams worth of that, what I will do is I'll put in some rendered down beef fat just to kind of bulk it out, and then that will be fine. And then heat it up to 100 degrees so it's sterile, and then pour it into a metal container or a glass container, something heat proof, and then we can let it solidify and then turn it into pastry, and it will be delicious pastry. Right, so I've heated it up. I'm just about to pour it into the container, but we have this that's come to the surface here, which is just some impurities which have just boiled to the top and then set and become a little bit of raft. That's not going to go in our pastry. I'm just going to scoop that off and I'm going to pour it into that container. In fact, can we? No, I don't think I can. I can't do it one-handed. We'll just whip that off, pour it in the container, and then when it's solidified, we'll have a look at it and we'll kind of have a look at the consistency. So the fat has been in the fridge and solidified. It's now at a good consistency. That it's not too hard and it's not too soft. That will make a delicious pastry. My hands clean. I must have washed them at least 40 times today. So that will make delicious pastry, and it will take on all the flavour of those delicious lards. So it was braising steak, so there was a beef stock that I braised it in and a little bit of tomato, so it'll have taken on those kind of flavours as well as the meat as well. And the lard, where did the lard come from? Oh no, the lard was from some ham joints, so it was the skin and the fat which I minced and then rendered down, so it's taken on all that kind of like ham flavour as well, so that will make delicious pastry. Bit of a long video, not really about anything in particular, but just kind of a bit of a document of how I do things really. So, not really a success, because it's nothing, well, kind of is, but it isn't, because it's not really about anything. So there we go, a ridiculously long video.